one of the things that I've been thinking about this entire interview is dissociation, right? I'm leaving my body at some point. And because of my past, because of my childhood, complex trauma, all the different things that I've experienced over my life, only within the last few years have I had real awareness of how frequently I do this, where I will just check out and be gone. And obviously there's varying degrees to it. There's different levels to it. But if you wouldn't mind speaking to, I mean, yes, it's a coping mechanism. Yes, it's how I'm protecting myself. All of those things I think are implicit, maybe, we're always trying to be considerate of the person that's out there listening, because obviously not everybody has our same lived experience or all of those kind of different things. But I guess my question is, how do you work with that in the framework of IFS? Because I'm trying to think about it through that lens of like the part of me that will dissociate. It's almost like dissociation itself is a protector, where it's like, here we go. We're going to come in and implement this thing and just swoop in and pick you up, and we're fucking out of here. We're leaving because this situation is no longer safe.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's from an IFS perspective, it's looking at dissociation as a part. And so, I would invite the person that I'm working with to bring awareness to what that feels like when it's happening. Because again, it can be happening without our awareness. It's there and we're like checked out, but we're like not consciously aware that that's what's happening until maybe after the fact. And so, it can be an invitation, like if you're working with a therapist or a healer who's trained in some form of this, part IFS or some other parts work, we're trained as part finders. And so again, we're going to be looking at like changes in the person's like body language, what their eyes do, how their tone of voice changes. And so it might be that you need someone else sometimes to have an invitation to bring awareness to it. I want to say that too, that sometimes this stuff is just really blended and we just aren't having that conscious awareness on our own of it. And that's where having someone there observing us can be really helpful. So, but yeah, in IFS sense, when I invite, for me as well, having, a part that would, have me dissociate. And you're right, it's at varying degrees and levels. When I was a kid, I used to faint, so it was very, and now, as I gotten older, it's more of like, I can feel like a wash kind of come over me where like, I can just kind of feel my eyesight just kind of go like off to the side. And then that's my cue of like, oh, here's my dissociation. And then that right there is a level of unblending when you're bringing awareness to it, because it's still happening, but now you're aware of it. And then that then gives you the opportunity to then turn towards it, if that feels safe to the rest of your parts, to then be able to befriend it and to better understand, why is it doing that? When did it start doing that? Is it aware of how old you are now? And that maybe you're not in the same situations as you were in the past? Because maybe it's not. And, if you can befriend, it's just like with anxiety and depression, all of these things, it's like, if we can befriend this stuff within ourselves instead of it coming from other parts that are frustrated or fearful or mad or shaming, it's like, it's a whole nother world of, these parts can still be there. And most likely they're not going to be as intense because they feel seen. They feel heard. They feel connected to you. They're not being, polarized with other parts that don't like them. So that's where you feel, like you were saying, Steph, like that openness, in your belly and your chest, and just like this settling in of like, we can all be here and that's okay. But yeah, dissociation, it's a state. So like you can look at it as like it's a nervous system state, maybe like within the dorsal shutdown, where it's connected to that. And then this is where you combine like polyvagal and IFS together. So it's like you bring awareness to maybe when you're going into dorsal, you have dissociation. And then is that connected to a part? So that's where there's power in bringing awareness to knowing what you experience in each of those nervous system states to then bring connection to the parts that are maybe attached to those things.
Natalie, we're going to have you come back and do a whole another episode on the nervous system and polyvagal theory and the blending of all of it. So
I love talking about it. So yeah. I'd be happy to.
The whole nervous system aspect of healing, or just even just not even healing, just awareness of what your nervous system is doing, that feels like the edge of our growth right now, where we processed things intellectually for a really long time, and then we started to get into our bodies and started to be able to feel our emotions and started to be able to connect with the pain or the belly or the back or things like that. And now it's like I'm trying to, and I say we because I know that Steph's on a similar path, but really trying to hone in on the uniqueness of like, because my nervous system will react first. It's like my nervous, at least it feels that way, right? Where my nervous system will respond to whatever's happening in my brain, outside of my body, externally. My nervous system is almost always the very first line of defense, I guess, right? Or the first reactionary part of me. And the sooner I can catch my nervous system's response, then the sooner I can be cognitive of what's actually taking place. Is this something that is warranted in the moment because I am needing to fight, flight, freeze, I'm needing a response? Or is this probably something that's in my head or in my heart or in my body or in my emotions or something?
Yeah.
So it feels like the leading edge for me right now is trying to really unpack and understand all the things that shape and mold. Because, see, here we go. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. But for me, I recognize that there are so many unconscious things that I have just like fuck all awareness about when it comes to what actually affects my nervous system.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I feel like it's almost like operating completely autonomously. And I'm trying to learn how to tap in and watch it and participate with it, and then learn how to work with it as opposed to just being at the mercy of whatever's happening.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a big part of what I'm writing in my book is, that the way I'm looking at this is that there's kind of two different ways the way I'm looking at it in terms of how we get triggered with anxiety, particularly anxiety. And that is our nervous system can activate the psychology. So like the nervous system can get activated first, which then impacts like triggers our parts. And then it can be the other way too, where our parts, our psychology is impacting and triggering our nervous system. So, and so that's where it can be empowering to get curious and get to know for yourself as an individual what each of those things feels like.
We were meant to be.